Hey y'all, welcome back. Welcome back. It is me, BrittReacts, and today we are in fact going to dive into Candace Owens' series on Brigitte, Macron. We'll talk about it more on the other side, but this is Becoming Brigitte, Gaslighting the Public, episode 1 from, like I said before, Candace Owens's. Yeah. I'll see you on the other side.
All right, guys. So we delayed the second installment of the Becoming Brigitte series because after announcing that we were going to air the episode on our candaceowens.com website, we underwent extensive DDoS attacks all weekend. Essentially, our servers were being overwhelmed. Then yesterday evening, we received a second strongly worded letter from the Élysée Palace from Brigitte and Emmanuel Macron. This time it's a very brief letter, which we are going to show you in its entirety later on in the show. What can we say other than the Macrons sure are not behaving like a couple who have absolutely nothing to hide? So let's figure out why they are behaving the way that they are. Welcome back to our Becoming Brigitte series.
I mentioned during my first reaction to not only this story but Candace's YouTube channel that I loved her opening, and I think someone commented and said that Kanye West did it, and now that I've heard it again, it definitely sounds like a Kanye West production. So that's so interesting. Okay, I just want to give some, I don't know. Let's talk. Let's chat. Number one, just because I am reacting to something does not mean I believe it. It doesn't mean I'm siding with it. It doesn't mean I'm taking it as factual or at face value that it is 100% right. It's quite the contrary. First of all, I'm just reacting. You're watching me react to something as if the camera's not here. Like if I was just sitting here and this YouTube video popped up on my feed and I watched it, I'm giving you the same intrusive thoughts that I would have if I was alone. I try to be objective, subjective. I try to play the devil's advocate. I try to put my own biases and perhaps sometimes my own perspective aside so that I'm not skewed in my own view or interpretation of this. I am not perfect. No one is perfect. I also say this often, and I think you guys know this. I am not on this wide web to be divisive. I'm not a divisive person. I do watch and react to content that can be polarizing, and perhaps the people in the content or producing the content can be divisive, but it's always my objective to remain very fair and open to all truths, because I do believe that there are, like, his side, her side, and somewhere in the middle is the truth, right? And so with that being said, I don't personally love Candace Owens. I've said this before. I've watched a lot of her content, and I think, as content creators, we have to be very honest in the fact that this is a business for a lot of us. This is our bread and butter for a lot of us. And so when you think about views and engagement, sometimes you do have to be a little spicy. You gotta get the people going. It's gotta be provocative sometimes. So I understand sound bites and clips of things to get people to essentially want to go look at your long form content. So I know for years, Candace Owens has had really divisive shorts and TikToks and reels or whatever, because these sound bites are being played by other channels as well as hers that I think are meant to get people to either love her, hate her, or for her to drive people to watch her full opinion. And again, we all do that as content creators. We're always trying to figure out ways to keep our audience engaged and get new engagement. I don't fault her or anyone else for that. I don't love her delivery all the time. I think sometimes she can come off, just some in ways that I don't agree with, but that doesn't make her right or wrong. That's just my own opinion, right? I don't know her intentions. I don't know why she decides to dig into series like this. I don't know her heart. I don't know her intentions. All I know is a lot of people ask me to react to it. I don't mind reacting to it. I think regardless, the story is interesting, and there's got to be some fact here, right? A lot of people have been saying things like, like this woman is not French. She's not, like, she doesn't live here. Why does she care? I mean, I totally understand you. I'm queen of, like, I mind the business that pays me. All right. Like, I totally get that. But at the end of the day, she is here to entertain, and this is what she chooses to do. So, let's all just subscribe to the fact that, like, one, if you don't like it, no one is forcing you to watch it. And two, take everything you read and watch on the internet with a grain of salt. I'm going to let Candace take it from here. I just feel like I really needed to say that. I read the comments. Sometimes I just shut them off and don't reply for my own mental health, but also because I can't argue with people who don't want to find common ground. I'll never do that. It's like, again, I'm not here to argue. But I just want to let you all know that I am going to react. I don't know if I'm going to do the whole series. It's a bit taxing as far as what goes on in the comments. But it's intriguing enough to me that I'm willing to watch episode 1. Okay? Is everybody all right? Can we continue? Let's.
So a lot of people were wondering with the first installment, the entry to this series, why are the French people allowing this to happen? How could they allow all of these things to happen? And you're probably wondering how on earth Brigitte and Emmanuel Macron have pulled this off, essentially this mass suppression of the press, so that none of us were even aware of all of this weird stuff happening in their country. How is it that Emmanuel Macron, who was virtually unknown to the public a year before he came into power, managed to scuttle the campaign of Francois Fillon, the man who was a shoo-in essentially for the presidency? How did he do all of this? Well, for English speakers, it's a bit like the rise of Barack Obama. Sure, yes, Barack Obama was a senator and he therefore was involved in politics to some degree, but his ascension into the presidency did sort of in many ways come out of nowhere. Except Barack Obama was not married to someone who was more than 2 decades older than him. Emmanuel Macron, just to be very clear, and I will state this again and again, was just 14 years old when he appeared in a school play at his school called La Providence. Brigitte, at that time, was a teacher at the same school who ran a theater workshop, okay? She was, in fact, 39 years old at this time and allegedly married with 3 children. One of her children, Lawrence, was the same age and therefore in school with Emmanuel Macron, okay? So the story goes that she saw him perform in a play and she was just swept away, eventually unwilling to resist her feelings for the much younger prince. So much so that she eventually divorced her husband. She broke up her family because of this. Of course, this is objectively a very creepy story. So how on earth did they sell it to the French public? That's where we need to begin here. The answer, of course, as always, is through a very intense propaganda campaign that is filled with lies and severe intentional misrepresentations. As Xavier Poussard, that is the journalist that broke this incredible story, puts in his forthcoming book, he wrote this, quote, "To sell this improbable story, intense propaganda was deployed across all media, television, radio, and the internet. Books praising Brigitte and Emmanuel and glossy magazine covers saturated the public space. The aim was to subliminally instill in the minds a storytelling designed by the cream of the Parisian specialists of public image."
Okay. I didn't see as many people combating the age difference and perhaps the inappropriateness of their relationship. Most of it was about Brigitte's gender and the questions around it. A lot of people believed it. A lot of people didn't. A lot of people were like, "Why? America's got its own issues. Why are we worried about this?" I also saw a lot of, Candace was just cherry picking things to make her story sound good. And all of these things are plausible, right? Like, it's journalism, it's mudslinging, it's all of these things. I don't know where the truth lies. I did have some questions revolving around, okay, perhaps they did meet when he was 14. Did they immediately get together? Was she with him while she was with her husband? Like, or did they get together once he became legal? Like, she didn't tap into that in the introduction, and perhaps she'll get to it here or in another episode of this series. But it was, and it is still interesting that she's saying, you know, kind of the suppression of the media, the people who are reporting on this. It is now also interesting it's also interesting that she's saying Macron kind of essentially came out of nowhere, and then slammed onto the cover of all these magazines. Now, again, do I know if this is true? No. Do I believe it? I don't have I got no foot in this race. Okay. I'm just watching a video. But I do believe that there are, you know, campaigns in the media to smear people or to uplift them and push them onto the public. I do believe those things happen across the board in politics and in celebrity, you know, in pop culture. So I guess that's why none of what Candace is saying feels like super far-fetched, but it also could be a complete falsehood. So I don't know. Let's keep watching.
This pulpy narrative told the story of Emmanuel Macron, a precocious and virtuoso student at Lycée La Providence in Amiens. The press compared him to Mozart, who won over his teacher Brigitte, a dynamic, beautiful, charismatic woman. End quote. So yeah, they sold this as a story of triumph over conformity, right? This age-defying love, perhaps, as we now know, an early nod to the written works of Macron's favorite author, André Gide, who, as we mentioned in a previous episode, was a self-admitted pederast, raped Muslim boys, and he wrote about this openly. And despite this, he would wind up, or at least his book would wind up, in Emmanuel Macron's first presidential portrait. Incredibly creepy.
That's wild.
On the 14th of April, 2016, when Paris Match, the magazine, devoted its first cover to Brigitte, the readers were told that one day in her heart, everything secretly changes. She attends Milan Kundera's play entitled Jacques et son Matre, in which one of the ninth graders, Emmanuel Macron, is the hero. He's already got his eagle eye, they write. Oh, yes, he's already got his eagle eye, kind of honing in on Brigitte. That's what we're told. Here's, by the way, a little video of Emmanuel Macron performing when he was younger in a play. You can just take a look at this. We can let this run.
It's a scarecrow.
Qu'est-ce qui fait le plus peur aux hommes? L'aboiement d'un chien, l'ombre d'un homme.
Wonderful, wonderful, irresistible.
She's
for an almost
so
40-year-old
condescending.
woman,
I can't take it.
And had him join her theater workshop in the next school year. Now, we should pause here to consider how terrifying it is that the media as an entity has this kind of power to romanticize acts of sheer evil and then to gaslight and bully those who recognize it to be so. Those of us who say, no, there's something very wrong with this picture. Anyways, no less than 60 newspaper covers were dedicated to Brigitte within a period of just 26 months. Paris Match alone thus far to date has dedicated 13 covers to Brigitte. Now, I would refer to that as sort of a psychological strategy of oversaturation, right? If you give the public so much information, whether it's true or false, it becomes immediately implausible to the average person that there might be something hidden, right? Because you're like, well, there's so much information. It becomes sort of the media bystander effect. If so many people are covering the story, then the story must be covered. It's already covered. There's nothing left for us to learn. So I'm going to now tell you the official legend that was established about Brigitte Macron in these early days by the media. It is as follows. First and foremost, they told the public that the age gap between them was that he was 17, an outright lie. and that Brigitte at the time was 36, also an outright lie. Now let's go through the timeline of Brigitte.
Okay, 17 and 36 does feel way less jarring as 14 and what did she say she was? Like, I don't know. This is I don't know the word that I'm looking for. Does it feel like a bit of a witch hunt? Possibly. But if everything Candace is saying is even a fraction, a little bit of true, I think there is space for some digging. What I will say towards the fact that the Macrons have lawyered up and sent her, essentially cease and desist or whatever, is that if they admit at any part to any of her story, then it'll make everything they say, whether let's say what Candace is saying about their age gap and how they really became a couple is true, but Brigitte's gender situation is not true. If they admit to the age thing, then most people are probably going to be like, well, she must be right about the other thing. So I can understand that them saying like, we just want you to be quiet. Like, we're not going to write a letter and say any of it is true or false. We just want you to be quiet because, again, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
At the time was 36, also an outright lie. Now let's go through the timeline of Brigitte's prior life, which was asserted by this same media, okay? They tell us that in 1953, on April 13th, 1953, ironically, the same date that the MK Ultra program came into existence, Brigitte Trogneau, maiden name Trogneau, was born in Amiens. She was the youngest daughter of a family of confectioners who prospered in northern France. Then they tell us that after a strict Catholic education with the Sacred Heart Sisters in 1974, when she was 21 years old, she married a man named André Louis Ozier, becoming then Brigitte Ozier, married to a bank executive. Following in her husband's footsteps, Brigitte Ozier began a career as a press officer at the Chamber of Commerce in Lille. And then they went on to have 3 children. One, firstborn, Sebastian, in 1975, a son. Then they had Laurence, a daughter. That's the one that was the same age as Emmanuel Macron and attended school with him. They had her allegedly in 1977. And then came Tifon. Tifon, you will come to recognize, is really the only one of the children that speaks out and defends Brigitte Macron, which is quite interesting. They had her allegedly in 1984. And then the story goes that after becoming this press officer and working there at the Chamber of Commerce, she decided to switch to teaching at some point in the mid-1980s, first in Strasbourg as a literature teacher at the Lucie Berger Protestant College, then, of course, at La Providence, the Jesuit college back in her native Amiens, because her and Emmanuel Macron are from the same place. So in 1991, she went back there. And of course, while she was there, she fell head over heels in love with the brilliant student, Emmanuel Macron. Now,
wow.
This entire story was being painted.
So the magazine didn't publish it in that way. I guess Candace and her team took footnotes and maybe, like, I'm just trying to understand, like, did the magazine just kind of tell her story? Why would a magazine, like, I don't know. If I wish y'all could hear all the questions in my head.
Painted absent any pictures, right? And so as the press was selling this, they tried to get readers to imagine that Brigitte was just irresistibly sexy and hot, right? Like she was this sort of 1980s pinup doll, just unbelievably like a Claudia Schiffer type. This was the image they were trying to paint in their head. Like she's older now, but ooh, if you had seen her when Emmanuel Macron saw her, she was like a pinup, and she was wearing short skirts. They talked about how she used to wear skirts and how all the boys were just drooling over her. All of these boys who happened to be going through puberty at the school, fantasizing about this hot Claudia Schiffer type teacher.
Why would they publish this?
And of course, the brilliant virtuoso Emmanuel Macron and her then began this sort of clandestine affair. Years later, in 2006, recognizing that she was hopelessly in love with Emmanuel Macron, she made a huge decision to break up her family by divorcing her husband, Andre Louis, the banker, and marrying her former student, Emmanuel Macron, just a year later in 2007. Okay. Again, that's the legend that was established by the media. Now, to control the public image of Brigitte, the couple brought in, well, a woman known as Michelle Marchand.
I would love, like, for Candace to produce, where I would love to see, like, how she's inserting and overlaying other things. I'd love to see, like, the source. I want her to cite this. Like, I want to see it. I want to see it highlighted in yellow, the parts where they're saying this story. Please.
The couple brought in, well, a woman known as Michelle Marchand. She goes by Mimi for short. That's the woman I'm showing you right here on the left-hand side, walking next to Brigitte. And she is known as the Pope of celebrity press, the Popess of the celebrity press. You do not cross Mimi. I'm talking about this all week. PR firms, people that they're at the top. She will break you down Pope. If she needs to. You can see all sorts of trials she's been involved in. She has been accused of using tactics of blackmail and coercion. We'll get into that in a little bit. And her task was to essentially flood the public with these hyper-selected photos of the wannabe presidential couple looking airbrushed and fabulous. You know, just sell this idea that nothing weird happened in the past. And so Mimi was able to enjoy essentially near exclusivity on Brigitte's image through her photo agency, which is known as Best Image. You will find, as we get deeper in this series, you yourself are going to fall down this hole and you're going to start looking for photos and trying to verify things about Brigitte's past. And you're going to see in the corner that a lot of these photos say Best Image. Yes, that is Mimi Marchand's photo image business. It means Mimi was in control of this image. Now, as far as the conversations that were being had between Mimi and Brigitte, there was one person acting as an intermediary. And that person's name is Xavier Niel. He is a billionaire, you should know, one of the wealthiest men.
Yeah, his name's, I've never seen his face, but his name sounds familiar. I will also say that, again, playing devil's advocate, oftentimes celebrities have their, like, favorite photographers or their press, whoever their PR management or agency is. They, like, will literally have one photographer or one, like, photography house or one agency that they get their photos from. Like, here's an example. In Atlanta, probably the most famous photographer in Atlanta for, like, hip hop culture, black culture, is Freddie O. And more often than not, anything you see that is Atlanta culture related, Freddie O's photos are used. And so he's a preferred photographer. I just say all that to say, like, yes, if you want to look at it in that way that Candace is saying or spinning it, then it probably does make sense. But if you look at it in another way, like the way I just explained it, perhaps that makes sense as well.
In France. And I should mention that he is also the son-in-law of Bernard Arnault, the CEO and the chairman of LVMH. Yes, that LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet, and Hennessy. In January of last year, Bernard Arnault overtook Elon Musk to become the richest man in the world.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Bernard Arnault's children, two of them, were actually taught by Brigitte in school. And you should know, two of his children were taught by Brigitte in school. Later, Brigitte developed a close relationship with Arnault's eldest daughter, who she didn't teach, Delphine, who would go on to become Brigitte's clothing provider through, obviously, Louis Vuitton's artistic director and stylist, okay? Just to follow that, Bernard Arnault has a daughter, and she gets involved in styling and dressing Brigitte Macron, the first lady. And she does this, obviously, through Louis Vuitton and taps their artistic director to be the stylist. That artistic director's name is Nicolas Ghesquière. Now, why am I telling you about that? Who cares what Brigitte is wearing? Well, you should just know as another fun fact that this man is the main promoter of transgenderism and androgyny in the fashion world. He's huge, okay? Not only has he been, and this is directly according to Out Magazine, deliberately hiring trans models and choosing them to open for Louis Vuitton's fashion show, like when he picked a 23-year-old transgendered individual named Crow Kian to open for their 2018 show in which they premiered their spring-summer collection. But Gaslighting also has taken it upon himself to launch the careers of a ton of transgender models all throughout the fashion industry. Like one person named Teddy Keane-Livon was thanked Nicholas profusely, who at the age of 23 became a household name after being discovered by Nicholas Gaslighting. At the age of 21, he was discovered. By the age of 23, he was thanking him. And so this is just the person that's dressing Brigitte. I digress. So what? Okay, Brigitte's stylist specializes in transgender.
So she's just bringing this to our attention. She's not saying these people have any like actual activity going on in this story, but what is the likelihood perhaps? I think there's a big likelihood. If you know anything about the real fashion industry, I'm talking like haute couture, like editorial, that's not surprising at all that there's some connection. But again, she's just presenting her facts. And so do with that information what you will.
Brigitte, I digress. So what? Okay, Brigitte's stylist specializes in transgenderism in the fashion world as a creative director for LVMH. Coincidence, you could say, right? Fine.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The point here is also to demonstrate the kind of power that surrounds Brigitte, because when we consider how it might be plausible for a story this big to have been intentionally covered up by the mainstream media, well, it's kind of important to know who is the surrounding cast and how powerful these people could be.
Fair.
The other point is that Xavier Neal, going back to him, that's Bernard Arnault's son-in-law, who was the go-between between the wannabe presidential couple and Mimi Marchand, our Pope press lady. Xavier Neal and Mimi met through a shared lawyer because both of them have a bit of a checkered past, okay? Xavier in the 1980s helped.
This, if for nothing else, could be a great television series. I mean, we've got checkered past, we've got people in power, we've got billionaires, we've got millionaires, we've got a wannabe presidential couple who fell in love as one was a youth. Like, come on. You can't write this type of stuff. Like, honestly, produce it, Netflix, pick it up, let's go. I'd watch it. I'd watch 5,000 seasons of it because it's juicy. True or not, it's juicy. I just decided right here, right now, in my chair, in my head, that we're going to split this up into two because it is a 50-minute video. And I don't know if you guys want to sit there and watch it that long with me because I don't want to sit here that long and watch it with me. And also, my baby's crying. So, my husband's home, don't worry. But we're going to get halfway through this. Talk to me in the comments. Again, if enough of you really want to watch it together, I will go and we will do that. But for a time's sake, people got things to do. There's bills to pay. You can't sit around and watch me, watch her and talk. Come on. All right, back to her.
Both of them have a bit of a checkered past, okay? Xavier in the 1980s helped develop a chat service that was dedicated to cyber sex, and it became incredibly lucrative for him. And then he became part owner of a chain of peep shows. And one of them was later found to be a front for a prostitution ring. And
I also want to just preface this as someone who's been to France quite a few times. Sexuality in France is not looked upon as it is here in the States. Sexuality in France is not taboo. It's kind of like, there's all kinds of, they don't hide it from the kids. Like, it's just not a kind of hush thing like it is here in the States. Like, people have different types of preferences in their relationships, and there's all types of, okay. But in France, the culture there is a lot different and outwardly more accepting about just sex, all types of it. All different preferences and things like that. So while Candace is saying this, this may be very true. But again, for someone who maybe's never been to Paris specifically, I can't even say all of France, but I know in Paris, this to be true. But if you've never been there, you would take this and be like, oh, wow. But perhaps some of these things she's saying just aren't as jarring in Paris as they are for us in the States. Do you know what I mean? Again, just playing devil's advocate, but I'll let her continue.
And one of them was later found to be a front for a prostitution ring. And in 2004, he was arrested on charges of aggravated pimping. I should be clear here that those charges were later dismissed. But I do also here want to quote Xavier Poussard's book. He says this: a lot has been written about Xavier Niel, the father of the free box and the €2 cell phone subscription plan. Essentially, this is like, just to make it clear for English listeners, it's almost like Verizon bundle. This is how he became extraordinarily wealthy. Today, he is a full member of the global hyperclass, connected to all the Silicon Valley big shots and propelled by Henry Kravis to the board of directors of the powerful American investment fund, KKR. However, the role of its storage service, DL Free, in hosting child pornography is still too little unknown. And Free has even been described by the Canadian Centre for Child Protective Services as the largest source of child sexual abuse images. Okay. Now, you can go down that line. You can look up what the Canadian Child Protection Project Arachnid is and why they started going after this, and that's connections to Xavier Niel, but that's not what we're here to talk about. I'm here to tell you about how he met Mimi Marchand through a shared lawyer, because she was serving time, Mimi Marchand, after being accused of various things. She had racked up a string of suspended prison sentences in the 1980s and spent 2 years behind bars awaiting trial over her involvement with her gangster boyfriend, who is identified in her biography as Hafid, even though eventually she was not convicted. And then eventually Xavier Niel gave her money to save Best Image. Then in 1998, she was handed another 3-year suspended sentence over another former boyfriend and a whole drug dealing operation. And through that, Xavier helped her out financially, of course, in 2024, when he saved her photo agency again, Best Image. And in turn, for him having saved Best Image or helped her out, I am sure that she looks after the images of him and his associates in the public, okay? So just how central was this woman
Now, mind you, she said, I am sure. She didn't say it was a fact. These are interesting things to note. I don't think the French take child exploitation in any way lightly. Obviously, if people are arrested, whether they're convicted or not, to be arrested means they do see it as a crime. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying that French people look at that differently. Just in what I know, the culture is just more accepting and a lot, maybe a little bit more open to even just discussing it. But yeah, that the other part of that is wild. So I'm knocking I'm Lord. All right, let's keep going. This is crazy.
Amy in creating this image of Brigitte to the public, okay? This woman who is known to be a little bit of a gangster behind the scenes. Like I said, you can look into her yourself, Mimi Marchand. In fact, I think the New York Times just did a takedown piece of her and all of her involvement. Well, just over a year after Macron was inaugurated, the president of France, Mimi had this picture of herself taken in the presidential office, making a V for victory sign with her hands. Yeah, because they were indeed victorious in having fooled the public about Brigitte. That's what I would imagine that's all about. And having
She looks like the gangster version of Martha Stewart. Does she not? Does she not?
Fooled the public about Brigitte. That's what I would imagine that's all about. But then something really interesting happened, okay? Very interesting happened. Brigitte and Emmanuel, shortly after that photo was taken, made the decision to sort of carefully pull away from Mimi Marchand, their PR fixer woman, because she was involved in another scandal. And you guys, I'm telling you, it just seems to be a lot of oopsies around this couple. It's weird, okay? So Mimi also shares another friend with Brigitte. They have a mutual friend in a billionaire, and that is named Marc Ladry de la Charrière, okay? Mark is so close to Brigitte, to be very clear, so close to Brigitte Macron, and he enjoys being photographed out with Brigitte Macron, so close that they decided to attend the production of a show together, a show called Starmania. And you're going, wow, why do I remember Candace talking about Starmania on the last episode? Oh, because that was the show that they attended together that was produced by Thomas Jolly, where Brigitte then handpicked Thomas Jolly to do the Olympics. So Mark Ledru was with her, okay, at that premiere when they were like, this is the right guy to throw on these Olympics, which the Olympic show, which had obviously transgendered individuals, we had drag queens that were strutting. There was a lot going on that offends my Christian senses, and I would call it satanic. Anyways, you're probably wondering.
I don't know, that was funny as a Christian. That offends my Christian senses. It was funny. I'm sorry.
That offends my Christian senses, and I would call it satanic. Anyways, you're probably wondering why Mimi's mutual friend with Brigitte caused a problem for the presidential couple, in which suddenly they said, we've got to back away from Mimi.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, that guy Mark Ledru, another billionaire, happens to have a really troubled son named Jeremy. And shortly after Mimi took that picture in the presidential office, it was revealed that Mimi did her friend Mark a solid by keeping Jeremy's name and his face out of the press because she runs the press. She's like a press gangster, so to speak. Jeremy, his son, was the former manager of a children's entertainment company who was twice convicted, once in 2008 and once in 2015. And you're never going to guess what it was for. Child pornography cases.
Lord.
And then again, beyond this time, and recently in 2004 and 24, the mother of his children summoned police to their place in Marrakesh out of fear after she went through his computer. And they have very young children.
No. All right. Say what you want, feel how you want to feel. But again, if all of this is true, why this is getting crazy. This is getting crazy. The children and the grown men involved is too much. It's too much. It's too much. It's too much. It's upsetting me. So much so that I had to bring out my butter pecan white chocolate fudge to calm my nerves. This is too much. It's too much. Why would, that's like Candace said, like, it's just weird that all of these kind of oopsies are, she's calling them oopsies, are happening around them. Like, you would think they would have really tried to clean this up if this is what's really going on. Like, what?
Fear after she went through his computer, and they have very young children. The ages at that time were 3 and 1, I believe. After discovering even more images on his computers, investigators collected 4,000 images of children on his computer, naked children that were being raped. For that, he has, by the way, gotten another slap on the wrist. What I was able to determine online, and again, obviously French is not my first language, is that he's been sentenced to just 8 months for that, and that sentence has been suspended. Meaning it won't happen until down the line. That's the last I could find on it. I'm happy to correct that if that information is wrong. So that's 3 child pornography convictions for Mark.
Just around.
And Mimi helped cover up the one in 2015. And so anyways, covering up Jeremy's tracks and that conviction was a bad look for the newly presidential couple. And so they began to pull away from her. But Mimi's kind of one of these people,
just like, I'm
we were talking about yesterday,
these
PR agents that you just don't cross, okay? And she didn't like that. She didn't like that people were starting to say that she was on the outs, that she was no longer allowed into Élysée Palace. Then a book was published in October of 2018 called The Book of Mimi, and it became even more clear that she was persona non grata in the presidential inner circle.
Lord, this
and
is
she was no longer invited to attend the Thursday meetings at the Élysée. And so what does a PR person do when they feel burned?
Burn you.
You know, they drop a bomb in the press. And it looks like she indeed dropped a bomb, an explosion in the press about Brigitte Macron.
Jesus.
In the magazine called Closer, okay? Brigitte had somehow been spotted at the entrance to the American hospital in Paris, reportedly for undergoing cosmetic surgery under general anesthesia. And the First Lady was furious about this publication, okay? She publicly condemned Closer magazine for her favorite invasion of privacy, okay? Understandable if you're at the hospital getting some work done. Her reaction, though, seemed like an overreaction, especially to journalist Xavier Poussard. It just struck him as odd because a year earlier, another magazine called The Express had similarly outed her for going under the knife with a doctor named Dr. Sydney Ohana, and yet she didn't care. She didn't face that doctor and the Express did not face any public condemnation. Brigitte was not mad at them. So Xavier's going, what particularly about this publication and Closer made her freak out, made her go so far as to set for the first time a precedent in which the First Lady came out and publicly condemned the press? So he began poring over that article in Closer, trying to understand, what did I miss? What did I miss? What's in here that set her off? And he found it.
Oh, no.
You see, while Closer had not named the surgeon, they didn't at all name the surgeon who worked on Brigitte, they did this sort of petty thing where they left a massive, undeniable clue as to who the surgeon was. In the magazine, they described the surgeon as a, quote, eminent and media-savvy plastic surgeon who would keenly quote Victor Hugo, his favorite expression, woman's flesh, ideal clay. Well, there was only one surgeon who had been featured in the press with that quotation just a year earlier in Paris Match, and his name was Dr. Patrick Buey. He's a plastic surgeon at the American Hospital in Paris, who in that Paris Match feature, which was entitled Operation Young Again, replied to a question that he was asked, and he said, woman's flesh, ideal clay. Now, why was this a bombshell in Closer, or rather a threat that was made, a shot that was fired, if you will, to Brigitte Macron? Because in France, Patrick Buey is known most eminently for one thing.
Oh, Lord.
Feminization surgery. He is the king of transgendered feminization surgery.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. I'll explain what I know feminization surgery to be. So I think it can be different parts of the body, but for a man who is transitioning into being a woman, right, they'll get their jaw shaved down or their cheekbones, like they go in and they enhance a man's features to look more like a woman's features. So they're softening everything up. Excuse me. Again, could it be a coincidence? Faux show. Is it? I don't know. But it's a little suspicious. It's sus, as the kids like to say. It's a little sus. Talk to me in the comments. I don't know what it said. I'm going to stop right there because I feel like that was like the bomb of that was like a great place to stop. It's right in the middle of the video. If you want to see more, let me know. Again, for me, I am just kind of, I do feel like I'm like listening to an audible, a book. It doesn't feel real. Yeah, I don't know. It's wild. But, you know, not me throwing stones from my glass house, child. Not me. Not me. There is no judgments over here. I'm just strictly listening because y'all asked me to. Maybe we'll be back for part 2 of episode 1. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll just move on down. Maybe there's something else y'all want me to watch on Candace Owens's YouTube channel. I'm open to all suggestions, so leave them down below. Share this video, like it. Make sure you're following for all of the new stuff I'll be posting, and go and have the day you deserve. Bye.